guys, Zach Leiden with Leiden Solar here. I wanted to go over the interconnection process. It's a big, long process for most utility companies that kind of happens in the background as your system is being planned prior to the actual construction, and also following construction to get your system hooked to the grid. It's probably one of the most critical steps in the entire solar process. The interconnection process is the process you need to follow to get your system, your solar generation system, hooked up to the utility company's grid. The process is there to ensure that your system operates safely and reliably in parallel with the grid system. So most solar systems are grid coupled or grid connected or grid dependent, however you want to refer to it. But what that means is when the grid is down, your system is also down. So utility companies did not design the grid for people to be making their own power. So we have to go through this interconnection process to make sure that your entire system shuts down when the grid shuts down. If the grid were to go down and there was some sort of an incident near your home, they want to be sure that your system is going to be shut down as well. So when someone comes to work on your area, you know, the transmissions line, if someone comes to work on the transmission lines, substations, you know, whatever in your area, they want to be sure that your system is not backfeeding the grid system. That way they're protected when they start working on those lines. And essentially what's required on our end is for the inverters or microinverters to be listed for anti-islanding protection, which essentially means they're not going to send power back to the grid when they don't sense it coming their way. So that's what utility companies come out to measure when they do the actual interconnection metering and testing. So what goes into the interconnection process? Like I said, it's a big, long process and it happens in the background. A lot of it is done by your solar contractor or designer. There's not a whole lot that happens on the homeowner side of things other than signing some paperwork and providing some information. Before the actual application even starts, there's a big, long pre-application process. And that is essentially your solar contractor, solar designer, going through the site plan and the one-line diagram to show the utility company where the system's going to be implemented and the electrical configuration of the entire system. The pre-application is essentially an initial screening by the utility company to ensure that your system is designed the way it should be to interact with the grid system. If it does meet those requirements, then it will proceed into the application process. When your system enters the actual application process for the interconnection agreement, it's going to undergo a feasibility study by engineers and an initial review. So they're also going to look over that material just one more time, make sure that everything's good to go, and then they're going to make sure that your system is going to interact well with the various transmission lines, substations, etc. in the area. Then it's going to proceed into a system impact and facilities study. I'm working right off the utility website right now, reading some of their information. This is one utility company that I go through, Xcel Energy, and they have a big, long interconnection process. So I'm kind of reading what this one is because a lot of them kind of mirror the system. Some are simpler, some are more complex, some take longer, some are way shorter. But in general, this is how the system goes. So it's going to be system impact and facility study. So they're going to evaluate the grid and your solar system and see how well those are going to work together. They're also going to look at, you know, their lines in the area, whether they're sized properly or not, and whether that can handle the load that your system may be sending to the grid. They're also going to look at your usage and compare that to what your system's going to be generating. They want to make sure that you're not way oversized and sending a bunch of power back to the grid, because like I said, they're not designed that way. When power companies, you know, even now, when power companies build these grid systems, they're not thinking about people creating power on the other end, and especially not sending it back to the grid. Do the power companies benefit from it? Yeah, but they want to make sure that everything is a-okay before they sign off on it and allow their people to be working around it. They just want to ensure that everyone stays safe when they're working on these systems or around these systems. So after they've done all their studies, your application goes into a construction status, and that essentially means you're cleared for construction, you're good to go. Your solar contractor can build the system according to the specs that they provided. They will have an opportunity to provide any material changes for review during that stage. And then they will also have an opportunity after the system is installed to provide any of the changes that weren't necessarily cleared ahead of time. They'll have an opportunity to disclose those and get those approved by the power company as well. In the background, the power company is going to be drafting an interconnection agreement, an actual agreement that the homeowner signs that goes over agreed upon rates, the specific type of billing mechanism that's going to be used in the case of excess generation, like net metering. After the installation is complete, the power company is going to come out and they're going to do metering and testing. And like I said before, they're going to come back and they're going to make sure that your system, when the grid shuts down, your system shuts down as well. And when you're generating excess electricity, you know that it's balancing what your system is doing. And then they're also testing to make sure, one, that I did my job right and that the system is working the way it should. They're also confirming that their meter is reading things right. A lot of the meters right now are bi-directional meters, so they're measuring both ways. And on the Xcel meters, Xcel Energy meters, you can see little arrows pointing one way when it's going back to the grid and pointing the other way when it's coming back to your house. So that's a good way to see. I'll do a video on that later, but that's a good way to see, you know, when you're actually sending power back to the grid. So those are some of the things that the utility company is looking for when they come out to do their interconnection testing and metering. If you don't have a bi-directional meter, and they're not extremely prevalent right now, so there may be some scenarios where you need a production meter installed. That's when the utility company will also come out and install one of those, and they'll test to make sure that's going well as planned as well. And they'll come out to make sure that that's being used properly as well. Once you pass the actual interconnection testing and metering phase, that means I did my job properly, and the meter and the utility after we pass the interconnection testing and metering portion, that means I did my job properly and your system is going to interact well with the grid system. In order for the utility company to come out and test and meter your system, they need to first see that I passed my electrical inspection. So your solar designer, installer, they should pass that electrical inspection, and then they send a completed certificate to the utility company. When the utility company receives that, then they know, okay, it's time to go test that system. I'll typically call and make sure that they received it, and then we'll get scheduled for them to come out and take a look at the actual system and how it's interacting. That process usually takes a week to schedule, a week to actually get together, so that's a 2-week process right there. And the testing itself probably takes an hour. After we've passed the interconnection testing and metering portion, then your system's ready to go. You're okay to operate it, and from that point forward, it will stay operating. But in the actual interconnection portal, they're going to send you that interconnection agreement, and that's the language that specifies your billing mechanism, how you're going to be paid, how your system works, and how it interacts with the grid. So that's one portion that goes to the homeowner. Sign it, your agreement is done, and you're good to go. That's something you should read through thoroughly, just so you know whether the utility company is going to be changing rates on you. I don't know if any of this is negotiable. I haven't done much research into the actual negotiation portion of the interconnection agreement. I don't think utility companies are generally willing to move much on any of it, so I don't know if it's worth trying, but it's definitely worth reading that language so you know exactly what you're getting into. You know, we should always read the fine print. Do we? Probably not as often as we should, but I think it's a 3-page document, so it's worth going through, taking a look at, you know, what they're saying and what you're signing, just so you know ahead of time. I don't foresee any issues with it. There really haven't been in the past, at least not with the clients that I've worked with, so that's just another thing to consider. In order to make this process go quickly and smoothly, a couple things you should do on your end is just making sure you have your paperwork in line, make sure you have your utility statements, do a little research. Most of the utility companies have a web page where you can go and read through some of this. You want to know what's going on in the background. I know for a lot of my clients, they don't really know what's going on, mainly because I don't need to tell them until the actual interconnection agreement, but you should be asking those questions. I have no problem telling them what's going on my end. It's just a big, long process, and most of it is, you know, kind of inconsequential. If we pass, we're good to go, you know, and if we don't, well, then we have to redesign the system, and that's when we have to start talking to the actual system owner about that. But generally, there's not a whole lot that homeowners need to know on that end other than reading through the actual interconnection agreement. But you can go online for most of these utility companies and find the information for that. And I would encourage you to do that research ahead of time and just check in with your solar contractor. It's easier for me to answer questions than it is to get information together, put it in a nice tidy format, and then send it to someone. So I would recommend reaching out to your solar contractor. They shouldn't be bothered by what you're asking, and it's really not a whole lot to ask. Where are we in the process, and do you need anything from me? Generally the answer is no, but it's always nice to have someone check in. That way I'm like, oh, I should probably tell them where we're at. And that would give you a good opportunity to, you know, ask about the timelines of things, because it is a long process. It can take, you know, over a couple months in some scenarios. We try to keep it going as quick as we can, but just like you know, we have deadlines, so does the utility company, and they do more than just checking in on your system, testing and metering. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and there's a whole timeline aspect to that. So you should be asking those questions and just checking in from time to time. Another thing you can do to speed up the process is just communicate clearly. Like I said, you can check in, but your solar contractor or designer should also be checking in with you when they send out something that needs to be signed or they need information from you. So just continue to communicate, maybe over communicate. There's no harm in just asking questions, checking in, seeing if anything's needed. I think that would go a long way to speeding up the process for the homeowner or business owner on the back end. Though the interconnection process is, you know, a super critical process and very necessary, and it ensures the safety of everyone, it is the interconnection process is probably one of the most consequential. The interconnection process is probably one of the most important steps in actually getting your system hooked up to the grid and completing the actual power generation of your system. I think it's an important process. Does it take longer than it should sometimes? Yeah. Are all utility companies different? Yeah. Can we work with them to make it go a little bit quicker? We can. And I think that's the difference maker for a lot of people and a lot of projects. You know, you can make it go quicker if you get them everything they need immediately when they need it. If I can be prepared and have your documents ready ahead of time, ready for the next step, then that'll also help the process go a lot quicker and it'll be a lot smoother. If you have any more questions on interconnection or, you know, metering, testing, billing mechanisms, please feel free to reach out to me. Any information that I don't have, I will chase down for you. It doesn't matter if you're in my area or not. I'm not about a sale. I am about educating people, helping as many people as I can, learn as much as they can about solar. I believe that's my job, is to make sure that everyone feels comfortable about it. There should be nothing hidden about what we do. The cost shouldn't be hidden. The process shouldn't be hidden. I think transparency is key in this market, and that's my goal, is to make sure that everyone knows exactly what they need to know. So if you have questions, please reach out to me. I will be glad to help you.